My name is Jessica Tucker, and I was 33 years old when my marriage ended exactly at midnight, surrounded by fireworks strangers and a man who thought I would beg him to stay. We had been married for 6 years, met in graduate school, built what everyone likes to call a solid life, dual income, downtown apartment, 2 vacations a year, tasteful furniture bought on joint credit cards, the illusion of permanence. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, the kind of role where bonuses came fast and conversations revolved around numbers, with too many zeros. I worked in corporate finance, steady, reliable, invisible by comparison. We split expenses proportionally. He made more, I contributed less. On paper, it was fair. In practice, it made him feel important and me feel replaceable. New Year's Eve began like every other performance we'd perfected. Rooftop party downtown. His coworkers, not mine. People I'd met enough times to recognize, but never enough to matter to. High earners, loud confidence, champagne poured like water. Conversations about resorts, private equity promotions that hadn't happened yet, but were spoken into existence anyway. I stood near the railing with a single beer, watching him blend effortlessly into the crowd, laughing at jokes I wasn't invited to hear. At around 11:30, he touched my elbow and guided me away from the noise toward a quieter corner of the roof. The city stretched beneath us, all lights and expectation. Music thumped behind us. People were already shouting countdown numbers that meant nothing yet. "We need to talk," he said. "Now?" I asked. "Yes, now. I can't keep pretending." That word, pretending, it landed heavier than the cold air. He didn't raise his voice, didn't look nervous. He spoke the way people do. When they've rehearsed something so many times it stops feeling cruel. He told me he wasn't happy, that the marriage wasn't working, that he didn't want counseling or space or time. He wanted out. I suggested therapy anyway. Reflex, not hope. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," he said. 3 weeks ago. I'm filing next week. Consider this your official notice." Behind him, someone started counting. 10, 9, 8. Fireworks from a neighboring building burst early, premature, and messy. I nodded. Notice received. The countdown hit 0. The sky exploded in color. Cheers erupted around us. Couples kissed. Glasses clinked. A new year began for everyone else. He watched me closely. Too closely. "Why are you smiling?" he asked. "I'm appreciating the timing," I said. Very theatrical. "This isn't funny." I didn't say it was. He looked unsettled, like I'd skipped a line in the script he expected me to follow. He asked what happened next. I told him we'd divide everything fairly, that his lawyer could contact mine, that we could do this civilly. "That's it?" he asked. "You're not going to fight this? Would it change your mind if I did?" "No." "Then there's nothing to fight about." We left the party 20 minutes later. His coworkers watched us go curiosity sharp behind their smiles. The Uber ride home was silent. He kept glancing at me like he was waiting for something, tears, rage, collapse. I gave him none of it. I watched the city celebrate a future I was already prepared to enter alone. At home, he went straight to the bedroom. I stayed in the kitchen, made coffee. I didn't intend to drink, sat at the table in the dark, and pulled out my phone. I sent 3 messages. The first to my divorce attorney. The second to my accountant. The third confirmed something that had been set in motion weeks earlier. I went to bed just before dawn, calm, in a way that only comes when the worst thing has already happened and you're still standing. I didn't sleep much that night, but not for the reason people expect. It wasn't shock keeping me awake. It was memory. Once the silence settled into the apartment and his breathing evened out beside me, everything I'd known for months replayed itself with brutal clarity, like my mind finally had permission to stop pretending. I found the burner phone in October. It was tucked into the side pocket of his gym bag, zipped, but not carefully, the way people hide things when they assume they'll never be searched for. I remember standing in the laundry room, with the bag open, the hum of the dryer filling the space, telling myself I was imagining it, that there was some innocent explanation, that married people don't usually carry a second phone unless they're cheating or planning to disappear. That night he drank too much wine at dinner. Celebrating a bonus, he said. He fell asleep quickly, heavy and unguarded. I lay awake for hours before I finally reached over, lifted his hand, and pressed his thumb to the phone screen. It unlocked instantly. I wish I could say I stopped after the first message, that I closed the phone and confronted him, that I cried or screamed or threw something. I did none of that. I sat there in the dark reading. The messages weren't just flirtation. They were logistics, schedules, complaints about me written like footnotes, jokes about how I wouldn't see it coming, plans about timing New Year's specifically, divorce filings, asset division, how to make sure he walked away clean while I was left confused and scrambling. The woman he was sleeping with wasn't a stranger. She was his regional manager, married, 2 kids. Power imbalance, secrecy, arrogance wrapped together and disguised as romance. They talked about their divorces like synchronized launches, January filings, a few quiet months, then going public. A new life built on the assumption that consequences were for other people. What gutted me wasn't even the affair itself. It was how thoroughly I'd been written out of my own marriage while still expected to perform in it. I paid bills, planned trips, asked how his day was. Meanwhile, he was funneling money into accounts he thought I didn't know about, calling them bonus savings, treating marital assets like personal exit funds. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, zipped the bag, folded the laundry, went to work the next morning, and smiled through meetings like nothing had happened. I didn't confront him because confrontation would have warned him, and warning him would have cost me leverage. Instead, I started preparing. I consulted a divorce attorney, quietly, one recommended by a colleague who knew how to keep her mouth shut, then a forensic accountant. I brought bank statements, tax returns, screenshots, timelines. We traced everything, every transfer, every hidden account, every lie dressed up as financial planning. November and December passed in a blur of pretending. Dinner dates, holiday parties, his hand on my back in public, familiar and false. I watched him rehearse his exit while believing he was in control of the timing. By the time New Year's Eve arrived, I wasn't waiting to be blindsided. I was waiting for him to speak first. That was the part he never understood. He thought the calm on my face at midnight meant I didn't care. He never considered the possibility that I already knew exactly how the next few weeks would unfold down to whose phone would ring first. I woke up at exactly 6 a.m, the way I always did on workdays, even though it was New Year's Day. Habit is a strange comfort when everything else is shifting underneath you. I moved quietly through the apartment, made coffee, toasted bread, cracked eggs into a pan, and set 2 plates on the table, like it was any other morning we'd ever shared. If I was going to watch his world tilt off its axis, I wanted it to happen against a backdrop of normalcy. He came out of the bedroom around 8, hair-rumpled eyes, dull with leftover champagne and confidence. He looked surprised to see breakfast waiting. "You're up early," he said. "So are you," I replied evenly, sliding a mug toward him. "Coffee?" "Yeah, thanks." We sat across from each other in a silence thick enough to bruise. His phone lay face down near his plate. Mine stayed in my pocket, vibrating occasionally with messages I didn't need to read yet. I watched him eat, watched the way his leg bounced under the table, watched him glance at me, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't expected. At 8:47 a.m., his phone rang. "Unknown number." He frowned, then answered cautiously. "Hello?" I saw the color drain from his face in real time. "Yes, this is he." "What? When did this happen?" He straightened in his chair, free hand gripping the edge of the table. "No, that's not possible. There must be some mistake." He stood up, pacing now, voice rising. $30,000 doesn't just disappear overnight. I took another sip of coffee, said nothing. He hung up slowly and stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. "Someone drained my private savings account," he said. "Everything's gone." "That's awful," I said quietly. "Sounds like identity theft. You should call them back." "I am. I'm going to call them right now." For the next hour, I listened as his panic escalated call by call. Bank, credit cards, investment accounts. Each conversation peeled away another layer of certainty. The accounts he thought were invisible weren't just empty. They were frozen, reversed legally, untouchable. "How is this possible?" he demanded into the phone. "My lawyer said these funds were protected." I looked up from my plate. "Which lawyer?" "The one I consulted last month," he snapped. "The one who's representing me." "You might want to ask them about that," I said gently. He did. 20 minutes on hold, his foot tapping hard enough to rattle the floor. When someone finally answered, his voice dropped, then rose again. "What do you mean you can't represent me anymore? I paid a retainer. Last week. Conflict of interest." "That doesn't make sense." He hung up without saying goodbye. "They dropped me," he said, disbelief cracking his voice. "Said they can't take my case." I nodded slowly. "That's unfortunate." What I didn't say was that I'd made sure of it weeks earlier. I'd consulted that firm first, a junior partner. Brief meeting enough to establish attorney-client privilege. Once that was in place, no one else there could touch his case without violating ethics rules. He'd walked straight into a closed door he didn't know existed. His phone rang again before he could speak. This time he recognized the number. He answered quickly. "Hey, no, now's not a good time. It's New Year's Day. Can this wait until Monday?" He listened, eyes widening. "I'll call you back," he said, then ended the call. "What was that?" I asked. He swallowed. "Work, emergency meeting, compliance issue. I have to go in. On New Year's Day." Apparently. I began clearing plates. "Need a ride?" "No, I'll take an Uber." He left 30 minutes later, still wearing yesterday's clothes jacket, thrown on without care, confidence leaking out of him with every step. The door closed behind him with a soft final click. I washed the dishes, folded laundry, turned on the television for background noise, and waited. My phone buzzed again, this time with updates I read carefully, methodically. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. He came home just before noon. I heard the elevator doors open down the hall, then the uneven rhythm of his footsteps, faster than usual, heavier. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the picture frames. I didn't jump. I didn't rush to greet him. I stayed exactly where I was seated on the couch remote, untouched, the television murmuring to no one. He didn't take his shoes off. "You did this," he said, voice already breaking. Not sad, breaking, sharp, furious, disoriented. "You had to have done this." "Done what I asked," finally looking up. "All of it. The accounts, the lawyer, my job." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a trapped animal. "They fired me. Effective immediately." I tilted my head slightly. "Fired." "Terminated," he snapped. "Ethics violations. Inappropriate relationship with a superior." He laughed once, hollow and incredulous. "Do you know how insane that sounds?" I held his gaze. "Did you have an inappropriate relationship with a superior?" "That's not the point." "It's the only point," I said. He stopped pacing, stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Someone sent them screenshots. Texts. Messages from my personal phone. They said it was an anonymous tip. His eyes narrowed. "It was you." "When would I have gotten screenshots from a phone I didn't know existed?" I asked calmly. He opened his mouth, closed it again. The certainty he'd walked in with began to fracture under the weight of logic he didn't want to acknowledge. "Maybe," I continued, "his wife found out. Maybe someone at work noticed you two together. Maybe you weren't as careful as you thought." I paused. "Maybe actions have consequences." He sank onto the armchair, face crumpling now. "This is going to ruin me. My career is over." "You violated company policy," I said. "That tends to have consequences." He looked up sharply. "Stop saying it like that. Like you're not involved. You set me up." "I documented an affair," I said. "I protected marital assets you tried to hide. I made sure you couldn't hire a conflicted lawyer. Those aren't setups, they're responses." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. "You knew," he said finally. "This whole time, you knew." "I found the burner phone in October." His face went white. "I read everything," I continued. "Every plan, every message, every laugh at my expense. You were planning your future while I was paying half the bills and pretending we were still partners." He stood abruptly, pulling his phone from his pocket, dialing frantically. It rang. And rang. No answer. "He's not picking up," he said, panic creeping into his voice. "She's not picking up." "Busy day," I said softly. "She probably got fired too. And I imagine her husband has questions." He stared at me in horror. "You told her husband." "I didn't have to," I replied. "HR did their job. Everything else follows." "This is vindictive," he shouted. "This is cruel." "This is accountability," I said. "You planned to leave me, take what you could hide, and walk away clean. I made sure that didn't happen." He grabbed his keys, hands shaking. "I can't be here. I need to leave." "Take what you need," I said. "Your lawyer will be in touch." "I don't have a lawyer." "Then you should find one," I replied evenly. Clock's ticking. He threw clothes into a suitcase, barely folded, barely thinking. By 8 that evening, he was gone. The apartment felt larger without him, quieter, lighter. For the first time in months, I exhaled without bracing for impact. The next morning arrived without drama, which felt almost surreal after the previous 24 hours. No slammed doors, no accusations echoing through the apartment. Just sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor and the low hum of the city resuming its routines, indifferent to the collapse of one man's carefully constructed plans. By noon, my attorney had sent the divorce filings. They were thorough, methodical, brutally precise. Every hidden account documented, every transfer traced. screenshots of messages between him and his regional manager attached with dates and timestamps, evidence of policy violations neatly organized, not to humiliate him, but to establish a clear pattern of decisions and consequences. The proposed asset division reflected the law, not emotion adjusted to account for the funds. He tried to conceal the legal costs incurred and the fact that he had been the higher earner throughout the marriage. Fair, not generous, not vengeful. He hired a lawyer by midweek, someone outside the firm he'd originally contacted. Younger, less experienced, almost certainly the only person willing to step into the mess on short notice. They sent back a counter-proposal that made me laugh out loud for the first time in weeks. 60% of assets. 3 years of spousal support. A complete erasure of reality delivered as if confidence alone could rewrite facts. My attorney responded with one sentence. If your client wishes to litigate, we are prepared to present all evidence of asset concealment and workplace misconduct in open court, where it will become public record. They backed down within 48 hours. The revised proposal was suddenly much closer to ours. While the legal chessboard settled into place, his personal world continued to shrink. His parents learned the truth through mutual friends who'd seen the termination notice circulate. They called me embarrassed and apologetic, insisting they hadn't raised him to behave that way. I told them the same thing I'd told myself: people make choices. What follows is simply the result. 2 weeks after New Year's, he called me from a number I didn't recognize. I made a mistake, he said, voice small and steady. A terrible one. Can we talk? We're talking, I replied. I was confused, scared. I thought I wanted something else. He swallowed. I don't. I want to fix this. We built something together. No, I said, not cruelly, just clearly. There was a pause on the line. That's it. You planned for months to leave me, I continued. You had an affair. You tried to hide marital assets. You announced a divorce at midnight on New Year's Eve in front of strangers. There's nothing to rebuild. I was going to end it, he insisted weakly. It wasn't serious. It was serious enough to get you fired, I said. Serious enough to plan a future. He started to cry then, not theatrically, just quietly. I have nothing now. You have what the law entitles you to, I replied. You'll land on your feet. Just not on my back. I ended the call and blocked the number. The war he'd imagined never happened, because the truth doesn't need to fight. It just needs daylight. The divorce finalized in March quietly without courtroom drama or raised voices. On paper, it looked clinical: percentages, signatures, dates, but every line carried the weight of choices made long before either of us signed our names. After the adjustments for the assets he'd tried to hide, the legal fees, and the accounting corrections, he walked away with just under 30% of what we'd built together. There was no spousal support. He had been the higher earner throughout our 6-year marriage, and the law doesn't reward someone for dismantling their own stability. He moved back in with his parents. I didn't hear that from him. I heard it through the quiet channels people use when news isn't meant to be celebrated or shared too loudly. Mutual acquaintances, a friend of a friend. The tone was always the same. Lowered voices, a hint of embarrassment. He'd taken a job in a different industry, a significant pay cut, starting over at an age when most people expect to be accelerating, not rebuilding. His affair partner didn't come out of it intact either. Her husband filed for divorce, took primary custody of their children. She lost her position and the reputation that had insulated her for years. I heard she tried to reconnect with my ex once everything was finalized, thinking shared damage might equal shared healing. He refused. Or maybe she did. At that point, it didn't matter. Their fantasy had collapsed under the weight of reality. My attorney told me I'd handled everything perfectly. Most people panic, he said. They get emotional. They make mistakes. They give away leverage out of guilt or fear. You didn't. I nodded, thanked him, and hung up. I didn't feel perfect. I felt tired. Bone-deep exhaustion from months of pretending everything was fine while quietly preparing for impact, from carrying knowledge that had nowhere to go, from smiling through dinners and holidays while planning an exit I never wanted but refused to be destroyed by. But underneath the exhaustion was something else. Relief. The smile he noticed at midnight, the one that unsettled him, was never about revenge. It was about certainty, about knowing I wouldn't be blindsided, about understanding that the worst had already happened behind the scenes, and what remained was simply the unveiling. His phone rang first that New Year's morning because his world was collapsing in real time. Mine stayed quiet because I'd already set everything in motion. People ask if I feel guilty, if I regret how it unfolded. I don't. He made calculated choices over 3 months. I responded with my own calculations. He tried to stack the deck in his favor. I reshuffled it. The silence after his phone call said everything, because by then he had run out of moves. No hidden money, no sympathetic lawyer, no high-paying job waiting on the other side, no affair partner standing by. Just consequences arriving exactly on schedule. That isn't revenge. That's reality showing up without fireworks. My name is Cynthia Brooks, and I am 42 years old. When Thomas Wallace came back from his retreat, he didn't ease into it. He didn't sit me down gently or circle the truth until I was ready. He stood in our kitchen, my kitchen technically, and said, "This trip made me realize I don't want you anymore. No emotion, no hesitation. The way someone comments on the weather when they're already thinking about what comes next." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't ask him to explain himself. I just looked at him for a long moment and said, "All right." That was it. One word. Calm enough that it unsettled him. We had been together for 11 years. Never married, not because I didn't want to, but because he didn't believe in labels or paperwork or what he liked to call entanglement. He preferred things fluid, independent. I went along with it because I loved him and because I believed that commitment showed up in daily choices, not legal documents. We owned a house together, or rather I did. I bought it 8 years ago before he moved in. My name was on the deed. My credit secured the mortgage. My savings covered the down payment. He paid toward utilities and groceries, helped furnish the place, contributed in ways that felt shared at the time. But the house had always been mine. We discussed it openly, especially when friends got married or bought property together. He liked the arrangement, said it made things simpler if life ever went sideways. Life went sideways 3 weeks ago when Thomas left for a 10-day mindfulness retreat in another state. Yoga, journaling, silence, a group he'd met through his wellness center. I didn't think much of it. He'd been talking for months about needing space to reconnect with himself. Work had been brutal for both of us. I run a consulting firm. He manages a wellness center. We'd been exhausted orbiting each other more than meeting. I picked him up from the airport on a Tuesday night. He stared out the window the entire drive home. When I asked how the retreat was, he said it was transformative. When I asked what that meant, he didn't answer. I made dinner. Pasta, salad, nothing fancy. He barely touched it. Kept checking his phone like he was waiting for permission to say something. Finally, he looked up and said, "I need to talk to you." I put my fork down. I already knew. This trip made me realize I don't want you anymore. No build-up, no apology, just a statement of fact delivered like a conclusion he'd already processed alone. I sat there for a moment, then nodded. All right. He frowned. That's it. What do you want me to say? I asked. You've made a decision. I thought you'd be more upset. I'm upset, I said evenly. I'm just not going to perform it for you. That's when I saw it the flicker of disappointment, like he'd wanted tears, or anger, or chaos. Something he could point to later and say, "See, that's why I had to leave." "I'll start looking for a place," he said. "I just need a few weeks to figure things out." "Take your time," I replied. "I'm not kicking you out tomorrow." He studied me. "You're being very calm about this." "What's the alternative?" I asked. Screaming. Throwing things. "We're adults. This is ending. Let's handle it like adults." He went upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard him on the phone, voice low and animated. I cleaned up dinner, loaded the dishwasher, sent a few emails I couldn't focus on, and eventually went to bed alone. I stared at the ceiling until nearly 3 a.m, wondering when exactly he'd decided our life together was expendable. The next morning, he was already up, laptop open at the kitchen table, scrolling through apartment listings. "Morning," I said. "Morning." I poured 2 cups of coffee out of habit and slid one toward him. He took it without looking at me. "I found a few places," he said. "Going to schedule some viewings." "Okay." "Most of them want first month last month and a security deposit," he added. "It's going to be tight until my next paycheck." I didn't respond, just sipped my coffee. "I might need to borrow some money," he continued. "Just for the deposits. I'll pay you back." How much? I asked. "Maybe 5,000. I laughed before I could stop myself. "You're breaking up with me and asking me for $5,000 in the same conversation." "It's a loan," he snapped. "I just said I'd pay you back." "No," I said calmly. "You'll figure it out yourself." "That's petty." "That's reality," I replied. "You don't want me anymore. Part of that is not having access to my money." He slammed his laptop shut. "I've contributed to this household for years." "You've paid utilities and groceries," I said. "I've paid the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, and every major repair. Don't rewrite history now." He stood, grabbed his coffee, and went back upstairs. The guest room door slammed hard enough to shake the frame. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. And that was when I realized this wasn't over. It was just beginning. By the next afternoon, the house had developed a strange rhythm. We moved around each other like strangers who shared a schedule but not a life. Doors closed softly. Footsteps paused to avoid crossing paths. Every sound felt amplified, as if the walls themselves were listening, keeping score. Thomas knocked on my office door around 2 p.m. A polite knock. Careful. The kind of knock people use when they already know the answer might not go their way. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Sure," I said, swiveling my chair away from my screen. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, then sat across from me. He looked composed, but I recognized the tension in his jaw. This wasn't about emotions. This was logistics. When feelings fail, logistics always follow. "I've been thinking about the practical stuff," he began. "The apartments I'm looking at all require proof of income references, credit checks, standard things." "Okay." "The issue is, my credit isn't great. I had some problems a few years ago with a credit card. It's mostly resolved, but my score hasn't fully recovered." I leaned back slightly. I could already see where this was headed, and the fact that he was easing into it only confirmed it. "And most landlords," he continued, "want a cosigner if your credit is below a certain threshold." "No," I said before he could finish. He blinked. "I haven't even asked yet." "You're about to ask me to cosign your lease," I replied. "The answer is no." "I need help, Cynthia," he said, his voice tightening. "I can't get approved without one." "Then find someone else, a family member, a friend. My parents are retired. They don't qualify. My friends either don't make enough or won't do it." "Then find a different apartment," I said. "Find a roommate situation. Something that doesn't require a cosigner. Those options are either unsafe or too far from my work." "Then there's still options," I replied. "They're just not the ones you want." He stared at me incredulous. "You're really going to make this difficult?" "I'm not making anything difficult," I said calmly. "You decided to leave. You decided you don't want me anymore. Those were your words. You don't get to leave and expect me to remain responsible for your housing. I thought we could be adults about this." "We are being adults," I said. "Adults understand that decisions have consequences." He stood abruptly and left the office. For the next hour, I heard him making phone calls. His parents, his sister, friends. Each call ended with the same sharp exhale of frustration, his voice rising just enough for me to catch fragments, impossible, unfair. I don't know what else to do. Later that evening, he came back into my office, shoulders slumped. "I talked to my parents," he said. "They can help with deposit money, but they can't cosign. Their accountant advised against it." "Okay," I said. "That's all you have to say." "What would you like me to say?" I asked. "I already told you I'm not cosigning." "I need to move out," he said. "I can't stay here indefinitely." "I didn't say you could," I replied. "I said take your time. That doesn't mean months. It means a reasonable amount of time." "How long is reasonable?" "End of the month," I said. 3 weeks. His face fell. "That's not enough time." "It's plenty of time," I said evenly. "If you're actually looking at realistic options." "And what if I can't find a place by then?" "Then you'll need a backup plan," I said. "A hotel. A friend's couch. Storage for your things. Whatever it takes." "You're being cruel." "I'm being practical." "You don't have to do this," he said. "You're choosing to." "No," I replied. "You ended this relationship. You don't get to dictate how I handle my property afterward." He turned away, jaw clenched, and left the room without another word. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table long after the house had gone quiet. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt in the way people expect. What I felt was something colder, clearer. He hadn't asked for love back. He hadn't asked to fix us. He'd asked for access. And that told me everything I needed to know. A week passed, and the house began to feel like a waiting room, quiet, tense, suspended between what had been and what was coming. Thomas toured apartment after apartment. I stopped keeping track after the 10th listing he mentioned over dinner we no longer shared. Every place fell apart the same way. Income thresholds he didn't meet, credit checks that stalled the process, cosigners required. Each rejection chipped away at the confidence he'd carried back from that retreat, the confidence that had fueled his certainty when he told me he didn't want me anymore. He started coming home later. I didn't ask where he'd been. I didn't need to. Whatever he was searching for wasn't something I could give him anymore, even if I wanted to. One night, close to 11, he stood in the doorway of my office while I was finishing up work. He looked exhausted. Not performatively tired, not dramatic, just worn down in a way that suggested reality had finally caught up with him. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to actually consider it." "Go ahead," I replied. What if I stayed here for a few more months, he asked. Paid you rent. We'd be roommates. Basically a landlord-tenant situation. It would give me time to improve my credit, save more money, find something decent. No, I said. Why not, he demanded. Because you don't want me, I replied. You made that very clear. It would be temporary. It would be torture, I said, for both of us. You're not even willing to consider it. I've considered it, I said. The answer is still no. That's when he started crying. Not the kind of tears meant to manipulate, not the carefully timed cracks in the voice. These were real, messy, the kind that come when every fallback plan collapses at once. I don't know what to do, he said. Every option is terrible. The places I can afford without a cosigner are dangerous or falling apart. The places that are safe require things I can't provide. I'm stuck. You should have thought about this before you ended things, I said quietly. I made a mistake, he said. I looked up. What? I made a mistake, he repeated. The retreat, the whole thing. I got caught up in this idea of freedom, independence, finding myself. I thought I wanted out, but now I'm realizing I can't even afford to leave. The words settled between us like dust. So you don't actually want me, I said. You just need me. That's not fair, he snapped. It's accurate, I replied. Can we try to work this out, he asked. Go to counseling, something. No. Why not? Because when you came back from your retreat, I said you didn't want counseling. You didn't want to talk. You wanted out. You said it without hesitation, without emotion. You'd already decided. People make mistakes, he argued. People say things they don't mean. You meant it, I said. You're just realizing now that leaving is harder than you thought. He stood abruptly and left the room. Minutes later, I heard him on the phone in the guest room again, louder this time. I caught words through the wall, impossible, controlling, trapped. I sat at my desk long after the call ended, staring at the closed door. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about consequences, and he was finally starting to feel them. The deadline crept closer with the quiet inevitability of a tide you can see but can't stop. 2 days, 48 hours. Thomas still didn't have a place. He paced more, slept less. Every conversation he had sounded like a negotiation that kept failing before it even reached the terms. I watched him from a distance, not with satisfaction, not with cruelty, but with a growing certainty that this outcome had been set the moment he decided freedom meant walking away without a plan. The night before the end-of-month deadline, he knocked on my bedroom door. I was sitting on the bed reading when the knock came, hesitant, careful, like someone approaching an animal they weren't sure would bite. We need to talk, he said, already opening the door. We've talked plenty, I replied. Tomorrow's the deadline. He stepped inside anyway. I have nowhere to go. That's unfortunate. His face tightened. You're really going to make me homeless. I'm not making you anything, I said calmly. I'm enforcing a boundary. You have options. Moving back with my parents isn't an option, he shot back. They live 4 hours away. I'd have to quit my job. Start over. You wanted independence, I reminded him. You wanted to not be entangled with me. This is what that looks like. I was wrong, he said, his voice breaking. I told you I was wrong. You were wrong about being able to afford independence, I said. Not about wanting it. That's not true. It is, I replied. You don't want me back. You want your comfortable life back. The house, the stability, the safety net. That's a horrible thing to say. It's an honest one, I said. Something you avoided on that retreat. He sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped together like he was praying to a god that had already turned away. What if I signed something, he asked suddenly? A lease agreement. Market rate rent. A legal landlord-tenant relationship. Everything official. No. Why not? His voice cracked. You'd be getting income from a room that would otherwise sit empty. Because I don't want you here, I said quietly. You don't want me. I don't want to live with someone who looked me in the eye and said they didn't want me anymore. You're punishing me. I'm protecting myself. He stood breathing hard, anger and panic colliding in his expression. Fine. I'll take the apartment I looked at last week, the one in the sketchy neighborhood, the one with broken locks and mold. At least I'll be out of your hair. Don't try to guilt me, I said. You have other options. You're choosing not to take them. Moving 4 hours away is a complete life reset. Then maybe I said evenly, you should have thought about that before you came back from your retreat and decided to blow up our life together. He stormed out of the room and slammed the door. Moments later, I heard drawers opening, zippers scraping, the sound of someone packing, not with intention, but with desperation. I lay back against the headboard and stared at the ceiling. Regret had finally arrived. It just came too late to matter. Morning came without ceremony. No dramatic confrontation, no final argument. Just the quiet understanding that the line I had drawn was about to be crossed one way or another. Thomas was already awake when I came downstairs. Boxes were stacked near the front door, half filled, careless, like he still hadn't fully accepted that this was actually happening. His car was backed into the driveway trunk, open, waiting. We moved around each other in silence at first. I poured coffee. He taped a box shut. The house felt hollow, stripped of its old rhythm, as if it had already adjusted to his absence before he had. Around mid-morning, he finally spoke. "My parents are coming this afternoon," he said. "They'll help me load the rest. I'll drive back with them tonight." I nodded. "Okay." "That's it?" He asked, a trace of disbelief creeping back into his voice. "What else is there to say?" He set the tape gun down harder than necessary. "I really didn't think you'd go through with this." "That's the problem," I replied. "You didn't think." His parents arrived just after noon. Polite, awkward. His mother hugged me, like this was something unfortunate that had happened to both of us, rather than a decision her son had made on his own. His father avoided my eyes, focused on carrying boxes, as if manual labor might excuse the silence. I helped carry things out, not because I owed him anything, but because this house and the life I'd built inside it didn't need bitterness embedded in the walls. We spoke only when necessary. Measurements, storage questions, logistics stripped of emotion. When the last box was loaded, Thomas stood by his car keys in hand. "This isn't how I wanted this to go," he said. I studied him for a moment. "How did you want it to go?" He hesitated. "I don't know. Just not like this." "You wanted to leave without consequences," I said quietly. "That's not how life works." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I know that now." "Do you?" I asked. He didn't answer. He got into his car, closed the door, and drove away. I watched until he turned the corner, then went back inside and closed the door behind me. The house was silent. Not empty, just honest. Stop. Part 6. Aftermath. In the weeks that followed, the silence settled into something livable. I walked through the rooms, noticing what was gone, the empty shelf in the bathroom, the cleared closet space, the missing photos from the hallway, and what remained. Stability, ownership, peace. A few weeks later, I received an email from Thomas. He'd settled in at his parents' house, found a remote position doing wellness coaching. Said he finally understood why I hadn't helped him. Said he needed to face the full weight of his decision. Said he hoped one day we could talk without anger. I didn't respond. A month after that, his sister reached out, told me he was struggling, depressed, regretful, asked if I'd be willing to talk to him. When I said no, she called me heartless. I blocked her number. 2 months later, I started dating someone new. A man I met through a friend. He had his own home, his own career, his own stability. He didn't need me to function, but he chose to be with me anyway. Thomas found out through mutual friends. He sent a long text about how quickly I'd moved on, how callous I was, how he'd wasted 11 years on someone who could replace him so easily. I blocked him too. Here's the truth about that night when he came back from his retreat and told me he didn't want me anymore. He meant it. In that moment, he believed he wanted freedom, independence, detachment. What he didn't understand was that he'd built his life on my foundation, that not wanting me meant not having access to everything that came with me. And when he finally realized that when the safety net disappeared, he expected me to save him, I chose not to. People called it cruel, called it revenge, called it heartless. I call it self-respect. I'm 42 years old. I own my house. I have my career. I have my dignity. And I have someone in my life now who sees my value and doesn't take it for granted. Thomas got exactly what he asked for. Complete independence, complete separation, no safety net. Turns out it's a lot lonelier than he imagined. My name is Ruby Farber, and I was 29 years old when my boyfriend decided I should stop existing. The text came in at 11:43 p.m. on a Thursday, right in the middle of my break at the warehouse. I remember the time because I stared at it longer than I should have, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something kinder. They didn't. "I need space. Don't call. Don't text. Don't exist for a while. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk." That was it. No explanation, no argument beforehand, no warning, just a command to disappear. My boyfriend Charlie was 27, and we had been together for 4 years, living together for 2. 6 hours earlier, we'd eaten dinner at the small kitchen table we picked out together. He laughed at something stupid on his phone, kissed my cheek, and told me to drive safe when I left for my night shift. Everything felt normal, comfortably, dangerously normal. I read the message again and again. A coworker named Dennis noticed I'd gone quiet. He leaned against the vending machine and asked if I was okay. I handed him my phone without saying a word. He read it once, then frowned. "That's brutal," he said carefully. Yeah, I replied. It is. I typed one word back. Done. Then I put my phone in my pocket and finished my shift. When I got home at 7:00 a.m., the apartment felt wrong before I even turned on the lights. His overnight bag was gone, a chunk of his clothes missing from the closet. His toothbrush wasn't in the bathroom cup anymore. Charlie hadn't just asked for space. He'd planned this, packed while I was gone. Sent the text knowing I couldn't come home to confront him. I sat down on the couch he insisted on buying, because it was more his style, and looked around the apartment we'd built together. 4 years of shared life were everywhere. His books mixed with mine. The throw pillows he teased me about but refused to get rid of. The coffee maker he bought me for my birthday. The watch from our anniversary. The jacket he gave me last Christmas and always said made me look powerful. He wanted me to not exist. Fine. I started in the living room. Slowly. Methodically. The throw pillows went into the first box. Then the frame photos. Every picture of us, smiling, traveling, pretending permanence, was guaranteed. Box after box, stacked neatly against the wall. The bedroom hurt more. The shirts he picked out for me. Jewelry he insisted suited my energy. A journal he bought me that I never used. Ticket stubs. Concert passes. A stupid coupon book he made me one Valentine's Day breakfast in bed, movie night, one free back massage. We always joked we'd save them for later. There was never a later. By noon I had 27 boxes. But I wasn't finished. I went through my phone next. Screenshots of messages where he talked about our future, our house, our kids, the way he said I made him feel safe. I printed all of it, 186 pages of promises, and boxed those too. By the time I sealed the last box in the kitchen, the matching mugs, the apron, the knife set there, were 40 boxes stacked in my living room. He wanted space. I was about to give him more than he ever imagined. By the time I finished taping the last box shut, my hands were shaking not from doubt, but from exhaustion. There's a difference. Doubt makes you hesitate. Exhaustion just makes you honest. 40 boxes sat in my living room like mute witnesses. Cardboard walls filled with memories Charlie had once wrapped in smiles and promises. Gifts. Symbols. Proof that what he called space was really an exit strategy with a contingency plan. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I thought I would collapse somewhere between the anniversary watch and the printed screenshots of our future, but instead something inside me went quiet and sharp, like a blade finally finding its edge. I borrowed a trailer from Dennis. He didn't ask questions, just helped me load. Box after box. He noticed the printed pages and raised an eyebrow. That's thorough, he said. He was very thorough when he erased me, I replied. We drove to his parents' house just after 4:30 p.m., the kind of suburban neighborhood where driveways stretch long and wide, designed for comfort and complacency. I knew the schedule. Charlie's father would still be at work. His mother, Deborah, would be home. Charlie would probably be there too, enjoying his carefully curated silence, working remotely, telling himself he was being mature. I backed the trailer up slowly and began unloading. I stacked the boxes neatly, 3 across, row after row, from the garage door all the way to the street. I didn't rush. I didn't throw anything. This wasn't anger, it was precision, a physical manifestation of everything he said he didn't want touching his life anymore. On the final box, I taped a note. You wanted space. Here's everything that connected us. Now you have infinite space. Your non-existent ex. I was pulling away when the front door flew open. Deborah stood there, frozen, mouth open, disbelief etched across her face like she'd walked into a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. My phone started ringing before I turned the corner. I ignored the first call. Then another. Then another. His mother. Then Charlie. Then his mother again. I answered on the 4th ring. What is the meaning of this? Deborah demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut. Hi, Deborah, I said calmly. Charlie asked for space and for me not to exist. I'm returning everything that made my existence inconvenient. That's not our property. Charlie's voice snapped in the background. Those are things I gave you. Exactly, I replied. And now they're reminders of you. Hard to not exist when your life is scattered all over my apartment. You're being ridiculous, he said. Come back here and move these boxes. I can't get my car out. That sounds like a you problem, I said evenly. I don't exist. Remember, ghosts can't move boxes. I hung up. By the time I got home, I had 47 missed calls. I counted. Not because I cared, but because the number amused me. Charlie, his mother, his sister Rachel, his best friend Jenna. Different voices, same message. You're being childish. This is petty. Move the boxes now. We're calling the police. You're insane. I responded to none of them. He wanted space. He wanted me gone. I was simply following instructions. 2 days later, the entitlement showed up at my door. At 6:00 a.m., someone pounded hard enough to rattle the frame. I checked the peephole. Charlie's father, Robert. I opened the door with the chain still on. "You're moving those boxes today," he said, not asking, declaring. "No," I replied. His jaw tightened. "Listen here. Those were gifts I cut in. I returned them because your son asked me not to exist. They're on your property now." "You humiliated him," Robert snapped. "He's devastated." "He texted me to disappear," I said quietly. "I'm actually not even supposed to be having this conversation." His fist clenched. For a moment, I thought he might swing. "Go ahead," I said. "Hit me. I'll press charges. Great look for your construction business." He lowered his hand and stormed off. 2 hours later, my apartment manager called about a complaint, abandoned property hoarding behavior. I invited her over. She walked into a spotless apartment and left shaking her head. That afternoon, I got a message from an unknown number. It was Rachel using someone else's phone. "You should know Charlie only asked for space because he was confused. A woman from his work has been pursuing him. He needed time to think. Time to think about replacing me." I screenshotted the message, didn't reply. Space granted. Permanently. The narrative changed overnight. By the next morning, Charlie had decided he wasn't the one who erased me. I was the one who overreacted. And once that version of the story existed, everyone around him grabbed onto it like a life raft. It started on social media. Charlie posted a long, carefully worded statement about how some people can't handle mature communication, about how asking for time to process emotions turns into retaliation, about how boundaries should be respected, and how painful it is to be punished for vulnerability. He never used my name, but he didn't have to. Anyone who knew us knew exactly who he was talking about. The comments rolled in fast. "This is why emotional maturity matters. Classic manipulation. So proud of you for choosing yourself. Women should feel safe asking for space." Safe. The word made my stomach turn. Dennis started screenshotting everything and sending it to me. "He's rewriting history," he texted. Hard. I didn't respond right away. I read the comments instead, watching people who had hugged me at parties and toasted our relationship suddenly diagnose me as unstable based on a paragraph written by a man who told me not to exist. Then something in me settled. Because I still had the receipts. I opened the folder on my laptop, the scanned PDF of 186 pages. 4 years of messages where Charlie talked about marriage, children, how I was the only person who ever really saw him, how safe he felt with me, how he couldn't imagine life without me. Promises don't disappear just because someone gets bored. I uploaded the file and wrote one caption. "Since we're sharing our truth, here's mine. 4 years of promises versus one text telling me to stop existing. I gave him the space he asked for. Now I'm being called abusive for respecting it. Make it make sense." I posted it. The reaction was immediate. People deleted comments. Quietly at first. Then in waves. Questions replaced accusations. Charlie's post vanished within an hour. But he wasn't done. That evening, around 8:00 p.m., there was a knock on my door. 2 police officers stood outside, both wearing the tired expressions of men who already knew how this was going to end. "Ma'am, one said we received a report about stolen property." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Let me guess," I said. "About 40 boxes." They exchanged a look. Yes. I showed them everything. Photos of the gifts before packing, messages where Charlie sent receipts, the original text telling me not to exist, Rachel's message about the coworker, the delivery photos time-stamped, organized, undeniable. So the older officer said slowly, "He gave you gifts, told you to disappear, and you returned the gifts to his parents' property." "Yes." "This is a civil matter," he said into his radio. "No theft. We're leaving." I could hear Charlie's voice screeching faintly through the radio, demanding they do something. The officers didn't even bother responding. After they left, I checked my security camera app. Charlie was sitting in his car in my apartment parking lot, waiting. For what I wasn't sure. For me to come outside, to cry, to apologize for not waiting quietly while he explored other options. I cooked dinner, watched a show, lived my life. He stayed for 2 hours. Then he left. A week later, the real collapse began. The boxes were still in his parents' driveway. Apparently, the garbage company refused to take that many at once. The rain soaked through the cardboard. Neighbors complained. HOA notices followed. Charlie showed up at my workplace next. The warehouse requires badges. He stood outside the gate for nearly an hour telling security there was an emergency. Dennis called me from the floor. "There's a guy out here says he's your boyfriend." "I don't have a boyfriend," I said. "Yeah," Dennis replied. "That's what I thought." When security threatened to call the police, Charlie finally left. Then came the invoice. An itemized list sent through his friend Jenna's Instagram. Leather jacket, $600. Watch, $1, $200. Headphones, $300. Coffee maker, $400. 47 items. Total owed $8,470 payment expected within 7 days or legal action would be taken. I forwarded it to my cousin, a paralegal. She laughed for 5 full minutes. "Gifts don't work like that," she said. He'd get laughed out of court. But Charlie wasn't finished. He called my mother. She lives 3 states away. They'd met maybe 5 times. He cried to her about how I was destroying his life, how he just needed time, how I was being vindictive. My mother listened. Then she said, "You told my daughter to stop existing. What exactly did you think would happen?" He hung up on her. That was when I realized something important. This wasn't about space. This was about control. And when he lost it, he panicked. I knew something was wrong the second I got home that Thursday. The apartment door wasn't wide open. That would have been obvious. It was worse than that, just slightly ajar, like someone had been careful, like they hadn't wanted it to look forced. My stomach dropped. I pushed the door open. Slowly, keys clenched between my fingers, the way every woman learns to do without being taught. The living room looked like a storm had passed through it. Couch cushions flipped, drawers pulled out, closet doors hanging open. At first I thought I'd been robbed. Then I noticed what wasn't gone. My TV was still there, my laptop, my work bag. Nothing expensive had been touched. But other things were missing. A spare coffee maker I bought myself. 2 hoodies Charlie used to steal and claim smelled like me. My favorite mug, the one he used to joke was ours. Random personal things. Things with no resale value. Things chosen for impact, not money. My hands started shaking again, but this time it wasn't exhaustion. It was fear. I opened my security camera app. There he was, 2:04 p.m. Charlie using his old key because I hadn't changed the locks yet, because some part of me still didn't believe I needed to. He moved through my apartment like it still belonged to him, opening drawers, looking under the bed, taking things and stuffing them into a backpack like he was on a scavenger hunt for leverage. I called the police immediately. When the officer arrived, I recognized him. Same one from the stolen property report. He watched the footage without interrupting. "Your ex again?" he asked finally. "Yes." "You want to press charges?" I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Charlie wasn't a resident anymore. He'd moved out. He'd told me he needed space. He had no right to be there. The officer explained it plainly, trespassing and theft. They arrested him that night. I didn't feel triumphant when I heard. I felt tired, bone-deep tired. The kind that comes from realizing someone you loved never respected your boundaries, only the ones that benefited them. He was released on bail the next morning. His father handled it. But the charges stuck. His lawyer tried to argue residency rights. I had texts, forwarded mail, his own message telling me he'd left. Evidence stacked higher than the boxes still rotting in his parents' driveway. The prosecutor called it clear-cut. A restraining order followed. Mutual, clean, no contact. Perfect, or so I thought. The harassment just changed shape. His mother started calling my employer, claiming I was unstable, dangerous, vindictive. HR opened an investigation. I brought screenshots, police reports, security footage. They closed the case in my favor and warned her that continued harassment would result in legal consequences. His father tried one last intimidation tactic, showed up at Dennis's place since he couldn't come near mine. Dennis is 6 feet tall and trains MMA for fun. The conversation was brief. Then came the fundraiser. Charlie's friends launched a social media campaign to help him with legal fees after being emotionally abused. It raised $127 before someone reported it for fraud and it was taken down. And just when I thought the absurdity had peaked, his sister reached out through a mutual friend. She didn't apologize. She wanted to know if I still had the coupon book. The Valentine's Day one, the one made for me, the one now listed as evidence. I didn't respond. Some things don't deserve closure. 2 weeks after the restraining order, I ran into Lena at a gas station just off the highway. I recognized her instantly, not because we'd ever met, but because Charlie had mentioned her often enough for her to feel familiar. The coworker, the one he said was just annoying, the one he needed space to think about. She was standing 2 pumps down, staring very hard at her phone, like if she didn't look at me, I wouldn't exist. I almost walked away. But then I realized something. I didn't owe Charlie silence anymore. "How's it going?" I asked. She flinched, then turned eyes wide with recognition. "Oh, hi." We stood there in that awkward vacuum where lies usually rush in to fill the space. Finally, she sighed. "Look," she said, "I didn't know. He told me you two were broken up, that you were stalking him, that he was scared of you." I pulled out my phone and showed her the text, the timestamp, the date. "I need space. Don't exist." Her face drained of color. "He moved in with me last week," she whispered. "Moved in? With all his boxes?" I asked. She let out a hollow laugh, all 40 of them. I laughed too, not kindly, not cruelly, just honestly. "He did the same thing to me," she said after a moment. "Texted this morning, said he needed space to think about us." The pattern was suddenly impossible to ignore. 3 days later, mutual gossip filled in the rest. Lena kicked him out after finding messages between Charlie and another woman at work. Another request for space, another exit strategy. As for me, life settled into something quieter. Not healed, not perfect, but mine. I changed the locks, deleted social media, started playing guitar again. Something Charlie used to complain was too loud. Joined a bowling league with Dennis. We were terrible, but terrible together is still together. The boxes were still sitting in his parents' driveway, wet, collapsing. The HOA sent them a notice. $50 per day fine until removed. Yesterday, Charlie texted from a friend's phone. "I hope you're happy ruining my life." I didn't respond. I don't exist. And honestly, that's never felt more peaceful. The silence afterward was different. Not the sharp, anxious kind that comes after a fight where you're waiting for the other person to break first. This was wider, softer, like standing in an empty room and realizing the echo is gone because there's nothing left to bounce off of. For weeks, nothing happened. No calls, no surprise appearances, no messages sent through other people's phones. The restraining order worked, not because it scared Charlie, but because there was nothing left for him to pull on. No reaction, no access, no illusion that I was still orbiting his choices. I started noticing things I hadn't noticed in years. How quiet my apartment could be, how my time stretched instead of snapping, how my thoughts didn't constantly loop around whether I was being too much or not enough. I bought new hoodies. I rearranged the furniture. I took the pictures down and didn't replace them. My mom called every Sunday, not to ask how the situation was going, but to ask how I was. We talked about nothing important, groceries, weather, what she was cooking for dinner. It felt grounding in a way I hadn't realized I was starving for. Dennis kept sending me updates I never asked for. The boxes were still there, mold creeping up the sides, cardboard collapsing in on itself. The HOA fines were stacking up, $50 a day, then another notice, then another. Apparently, Charlie wanted space, but not the responsibility that came with it. The last time I heard his name spoken out loud was at the grocery store. 2 strangers whispering in the aisle about that guy whose parents got fined by the HOA because of some breakup thing. Small towns remember everything, especially entitlement. I never corrected anyone. I never added context. I didn't need to. Healing didn't arrive like a movie ending. There was no sudden relief, no triumphant glow. It came quietly in moments I almost missed. Realizing I hadn't checked my phone all morning, not flinching, when a car that looked like his drove past, laughing without immediately wondering if it was too loud. 4 years doesn't vanish just because you decide it's over. I still thought about him sometimes, about the version of him I loved, about the jacket he gave me, the one thing I genuinely missed. It really was a nice jacket. But missing something doesn't mean you reach back for it. It just means it mattered once. Last week, I found the final text he sent, the one from a friend's phone. "I hope you're happy ruining my life." I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. Because here's the truth he never understood. I didn't ruin his life. I just stopped pausing mine. He asked me not to exist, so I stepped out of his world completely. And in that space, the real kind, the honest kind, I finally had room to breathe.